How is Israel getting around this?
How would it not be a racist thing? They want it to be a genocide. They want to kill all the Palestinians.
You can't criticize Israel without being anti-Semitic.
We hate freedom, that we are terrorists by default.
What would Palestine want?
The biggest misconception that they try to frame it as is that it's a conflict between a group of people who hate another group of people.
All the Jews leave Israel?
We don't hate the Jews. The Jews are our brothers, as are the Christians. You know what I mean? As being a Muslim myself, this is something that we're taught and something that I firmly believe. What we're fighting for is the same thing that every other human being would be fighting for.
All right, welcome back to Clear Views Podcast, guys. Where culture meets conversation. Today's episode is different. It's important. We're diving into one of the most complex, emotional, and controversial topics in the world today, and that is the conflict between Israel and Palestine. On my left, my co-host, bringing his perspective, Tim.
What up?
The show again. And then on my right, a special guest joining us today, Mo, a law student and activist who's been passionately advocating for Palestinian rights and justice. My job today is not to pick a side. I'm here to just ask real questions, keep it fair, and help all of us listen, because we don't grow by shouting over each other. We grow by listening to one another. Now, before we jump into, I did want to give a moment for opening statements. Mo, if you'd like to say anything before we begin?
Absolutely. My name is Mohammed, and I am excited to be here. I am, somebody who holds this topic very dear to him because of my connection to Palestine. I feel it's very important to have open and honest discussions about what's going on the ground over there, keeping it honest and moving forward. And hopefully we can shed some light about actually what's going on over there.
Yeah, beautiful. Tim, any opening statements?
Yeah. So my perspective on it a little bit is I really don't have a dog in this fight. I'm not Israeli or Palestinian. I do have a question in myself. Am I educated on the subject, or am I just been propagandized? So we'll see how that goes throughout this conversation. Again, I don't really have a dog in the fight, so I'm not too passionate on either side. I do have some pretty strong opinions. And again, I don't know where those really lie, and they're not really set in concrete at all or set in stone. They're kind of just what I've come to understand and maybe believe, but we'll kind of see how that goes as we talk.
Now, with the time crunch and obviously the subject matter, I want to try to get through as much as possible. So obviously, I do want to ask again that we all respect each other's takes and offer each person the opportunity to get through their full statement before we rebuttal. Sure. But leading into the first question, Mo, can you just briefly explain your activism and obviously why this cause matters to you personally? Obviously, I know you're Palestinian, but if there's anything a little deeper than that.
Yeah, I mean, growing up Palestinian and just witnessing firsthand the devastation and destruction that came with the establishment of Israel, being established through terrorism and kind of putting a population and indigenous group of people, their rights and their needs and their wants secondary to what they wanted to accomplish. So having half of my family being victim of the Nakba and being expelled from their lands in 1948, other half of my family was luckily not part of the Nakba, but faces everyday injustice and discrimination through the apartheid system that is currently established in Israel. And just having that as something close to my heart as possible, I grew up wanting to make a difference. I seen all of the different nations that kind of struggle through apartheid and racism and injustice. And I came to the conclusion that, if we want something to change, if we wanted to achieve liberation for ourselves, nobody was going to give it to us. This was something that we were going to have to achieve for ourselves, by ourselves. You know what I mean? So it's a very touchy subject. Growing up, we weren't really permitted to talk about it, public spaces, with fear of being labeled an anti-Semite, ironically being Palestinian. That's kind of an oxymoron for most. But growing up, more and more and doing more and more research and more exposure to prominent scholars and leaders in the cause has done nothing but solidify my desire to kind of keep pushing forward and doing what I can with the tools that I have to kind of bring this information to the public. You know what I mean? And with the public's support and the public's understanding of what's actually going on, it'll make for a better fight for actual liberation.
Right.
to be achieved.
Well said, man. Tim, I want to kind of pose you a question too as well. So what's your perspective on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and how did you come to form those views?
All right. Well, I've done a lot of reading on the subject. I've also listened to a lot of podcasts. That's probably about as I don't even know any Israelis to talk to or Palestinians to talk to. Yeah. So it's mostly just what I've heard.
Now you know one.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, exactly.
One, yeah.
So with that being said, no, I don't have no inside knowledge on anything,
Right.
So it's really just what's out in the field of media, right?
Okay.
I have a couple questions about when we talk about I really don't know what would we want the Jews to do right now with Israel. What would Palestine want? Like, what would be an ideal? All the Jews leave Israel?
No. I mean, obviously, that's not something that the Palestinians, us ourselves, want.
Okay.
What we would like to see happen is something that has taken place long before the establishment of Israel,
Okay.
which was pure harmony between Muslims, Christians, and Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Whether people understand the regional history or not, but traditionally going back hundreds and thousands of years, that has been ultimately the fact.
Yeah, that's what I've read. Yes,
they've been living in harmony. Salah ad-Din, when he retook Jerusalem, and he had knowledge that the Romans expelled all of the Jews from Jerusalem, the first thing he did was send out a cleric to go and round up Jewish families to bring them back into the Holy Land. Why? Because this is the Holy Land, not just for Muslims,
but
not just for Christians,
and, Jews,
and
right.
not just for Jews, but all three of us, right?
Absolutely.
This is the Holy Land for the three monotheistic religions, right, that dominate the world. So this is not something that we want to see the Jews, expelled out of there, but we want to see a land and a place where Palestinians ourselves can get the same liberty and the same justice that the Jews currently have for themselves,
Gotcha.
Without, pretty much not giving the Palestinians the same comfort and the same rights. You know
Gotcha.
what I mean? So it's not so much expelling them, but what I see is going to be probably the most logical route to take. And we're going to take a step back, because there was one thing that was never attempted, which was a United Nations resolution, which was to create a Palestinian state along with the Jewish state.
But wasn't that rejected by the Palestinians?
It was rejected by the Palestinians, but it was still affirmed by the United Nations. So it was still a plan that was set, and it was supposed to move forward. One thing that people don't understand is the Israeli side never allowed for that, right? So the Palestinians have always been living under the occupation and under the ruling of their, the Israeli rulers.
Okay, so tell me if I'm wrong here. So what I understood was the UN did come to an agreement between Israel and Palestine. Israel agreed, Palestine disagreed.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So then basically a war broke out, right? And so when that war broke out, Israel took more land than even what was in the original agreement.
Yeah.
Right. And that's when most of the Palestinians were actually kicked out, like 750,000 were kicked out,
48,
right?
yeah.
Right. And so at that moment, and they took more land than what was expected.
They took a third more than
Exactly.
what was promised to, or what was actually agreed upon in the United Nations partition of 47.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and at the time they were the minority population compared to the Arabic population.
Exactly.
Right.
And mind you that the Arab population, it didn't just consist of Muslims. So there were Jewish
right, yes, and Christian
Palestinians,
absolutely,
right?
yes.
But that law, right, and that split in which Israel kind of took the dominating position of the land and ruling power, they also, with doing that, kind of neglected their own Jewish Palestinian brethren. So they were kind of shut out, along with the Muslims, along with the Christians, when Israel was setting up, their foothold and their stronghold of the land.
Sure. This is kind of the conclusion I came to on reading up on it was, it doesn't say this anywhere, but do you think as the Jews started to kind of come in and immigrate back to Israel, in mass, or even in like 1880s, I think they started to come down a little bit.
The late 19th century,
right? And then they started more and more come down. Right. What it sounds to me like, it was the Jewish population in Europe, Eastern Europe, and Western Europe, probably pretty wealthy.
Yeah.
Up there.
Some of them, yeah.
I mean, most likely the ones moving to Palestine and buying up farms and coastal lands, right?
Well, let me just stop you right there. So a big part of that, what people don't understand, is a lot of this stuff was financed by these European Zionist Jewish financier houses, right?
Well,
so the Rothschilds,
Right. Sure.
these people were the ones that were kind of bankrolling all of these Jewish people to kind of go over there, and they were the ones that were acquiring this land.
Gotcha.
And the reason they were doing that is because they felt that the more land that they had, when it came down to getting that partition plan, right, they would have a more just fight or a more just reason to go ahead and argue, say, okay, well, we already own X amount of land.
Sure. Yeah, of
You know
course.
what
Yeah,
I mean?
definitely.
So
But it sounds like either way, I mean, however they got the money. I mean, they were buying it from Palestinians, right? They were buying that property from Palestinians.
A lot of the stuff were from absentee owners. So a lot of the time, the owners were nowhere to be found, and there was like a defaulto sale, like a lien sale. If
okay.
you will. You
Okay,
know what I mean?
gotcha.
So a lot of property that was acquired was purchased and acquired through like unethical means, if you will.
Gotcha.
The original, the actual property owners were nowhere to be found. They were either, kicked off the land or left for safety or, whatever the reason may be. But they took these opportunities to kind of seize this land and claim that they purchased, producing purchase certificates or, receipts or whatever whatever the case may be.
And this is a long while back. So this is, a time where, documents were probably like not the easiest to get a hold of and all these other things.
Yeah.
And then also I'm sure what it sounded like they were buying probably the high dollar pieces of property, right?
They were buying like the farmlands.
Or even coastal properties where the desirable properties, right? Sounds like that's kind of what they were doing. And it also seems like the reason why the minority population probably got the more benefit of this transaction, quote unquote, was because probably were a much wealthier percentage of those populations, right?
Yeah.
They might have been less population wise, but much more financially, more resources, right? So that makes sense to me about why they had that leverage, in that regard, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
With the UN on making that split, right? It wasn't just a population thing. It was like, what else do we guys bring to the table? And they bring a lot of finance, right? Okay, good.
Now, what I'm gonna ask this one question, then I want to segue into a little bit more of the meat and bones of this subject. So what do you believe are the biggest misconceptions that the public has about your side's position?
Oh man, that we hate Jews, that we hate freedom, that we are terrorists by default. You know what I mean? We're human beings.
Right.
You know what I mean? We're human beings just like everybody else is human beings. And what we're fighting for is the same thing that every other human being would be fighting for had they find themselves in that same situation. You know what I mean? Basic things, human rights, dignity, the right to self-determination, the right to freedom of movement. These are all basic things that we're fighting for. The biggest misconception that they try to frame it as is that it's a conflict between a group of people who hate another group of people. They fail to understand that the hate stems from something far more sinister. You know what I mean? It stems from the fact that these, the Palestinian people were displaced and uprooted, and all of their rights were essentially given to their Israeli replants, if you will. You know what I mean? So that's where the tension comes from.
Yeah.
It's not so much that we hate the Jews. We don't hate the Jews. The Jews are our brothers, as are the Christians. You know what I mean? As being a Muslim myself, this is something that we're taught and something that I firmly believe. We don't have a hatred towards anybody's beliefs. We don't have a hatred towards anybody's, faith or anything like that. But we do have a hatred towards injustice. And that's something that's been perpetrated and has been going on for close to a century. You know what I mean? So that's something that is always misconstrued, and it needs to be addressed, because that's not the case. It's not a case of one group of people hating the other based off of their faith, based off of their religion. It's not. It's based off of what actions led to.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well said. Tim, I know you don't have, obviously with you not being Israeli or anything like that, but do you feel like there's any misconceptions coming on the side of the Israel?
I mean, I don't like that everything is, you can't criticize Israel without being anti-Semitic. Semitic. I think that's ridiculous. I mean, you have to be able to criticize everybody. And that doesn't mean that you hate Jews just because you're criticizing, especially Israel as a state. I think that's ridiculous. Israel is a government. Like, I love America. I don't like our government. But you know what I'm saying? It's a completely different scenario, right? But at the same time, I think, my perception of this conflict has been like, for one, Palestinians are probably pretty bitter. And, and my perception was they actually did hate Jews. So Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I think that's probably most people's,
Yeah.
perception of it. That you guys, when they chant "river to the sea" and all that type of stuff.
So it's Zionism that we have a problem.
True.
with,
Yes.
right? So it's Zionism. So there's a conflation between Zionism and Judaism, which the Israeli government has done such a great job at kind of creating a smokescreen.
Sure. Yeah. No, I don't
mixing
disagree
in
with
the
that.
two, so that way you can't criticize one without being labeled
that's
another.
ridiculous.
You
That's
get what I'm saying?
100%,
But
100%.
if you really look into it, Zionism is nothing more but a political ideology.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
It's a ethno-supremacism ideology that, which was the basis for founding Israel. So
right.
the whole concept of Zionism is that the Jews are superior to everyone else. But here's the kicker, right? What they wanted to do is they wanted to create a nationality behind Judaism, right? Without any of the religious ties. So they didn't want to have any of the religious nuances tied to Zionism, but they wanted to use the Judaic religion as the poster front, so that way nobody could criticize it.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
If you really look into it, and you have hundreds of thousands of true to the Torah Jews that stand against Israel, that stand with the Palestinian cause. Why? Because in their own teachings, right, in their own book, it forbids them, right? God forbade them from having or establishing their own state, their own country. They are required to live amongst the nations of the world until their Messiah comes. At that point, they will establish their home. So what Zionism essentially did is it kind of pressed fast forward on everything, and they took it upon their own to go ahead and establish the Jewish state. Now, the true to the Torah Jews, the faithful Jews, that's like, that what we're talking about.
Sure.
These are the people that stand against it. Why? Because this goes against the direct commandments of God and what he told them are, is permissible or not permissible.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Let me segue into this now. So, this is obviously a little bit more of the touchier stuff, but I'll pose this to Tim first. Is Israel, in your opinion, an occupier, or is it defending itself from hostile threats?
I would say, again, based on what I've heard, I would personally say both. I would say that they are an occupier. I don't disagree that they're not an occupier. And I also don't agree with how they're occupying. I don't. I guess my question is, I'm not them. And so my outlook would be, if I have a person who is next door to me, and this is again how I would look at, let's break it down to a little bit more simpler. If me and you are in a room together and, or you're my neighbor, right? And you come, all right, basically, yeah, let's just go off the neighbor thing. And then I know there's more to this, but you're my neighbor and you come over and you punch me. Okay. And then I say, hey,
calm down,
stop punching me.
Relax yourself.
Right. And then you come back and you're like, no, punch me. You're going to try to punch me again. So I said, no. So I have bigger brothers and you don't. And we're all like, hey, you're not going to come punch me anymore. My bigger brothers are going to take care of you if you keep punching me, right? So then you're like, well, it's unfair that you have bigger brothers. It's unfair that you have bigger guys than me, that I can't, do what I want with you or take the things that I want from you, right? And I'm like, look, you're not going to take this anymore. This is mine and you're not taking this. And I have the bullies to back it up. Then you go and you say, so basically you keep doing this. And eventually I'm like, I'm going to tie your hands behind your back. Right. And I don't want to tie your hands behind your back because I want to work together with you, but you think I'm a thief because I stole something that was yours. I'm telling you, this is mine now from what I feel is justified means, but you keep now, every time I let you go, you attack me. And so you've given me no choice but to continue to tie you up or put you in a cage until we kind of come to an agreement that you are no longer going to do that anymore. And you need to prove to me that you're not going to continue to attack me. Right. And so that's kind of like, on a smaller basis, that's kind of how I've kind of broken it down into like, is that wrong or right of how I'm seeing that conflict? Because Israel seems like, again, from Western media, who knows? And I agree with you. Jewish media has really has a way of manipulating. I don't disagree with any of that, right? Yeah. So again, I have no idea what's true or not, right? But what it seems to me is like they're trying to say maybe it is stolen or not. They think they acquired it by a war. And at that point, it's theirs, right? So I understand you have grievance against that, but on this side, they think that it is theirs, right?
Okay.
And so that they feel justified in keeping that land. Now, you guys want it back.
Yeah.
So, we're going to do bombs and we're going to do this and we're going to do that to try to get it back. And I'm going to say, no, you're not. And I'm going to tie your hands behind your back because I feel like you continue to attack us. That's kind of like the nutshell that I've kind of came to.
That's usually the perspective that most people get from it.
Okay.
But what people fail to understand is there are laws in place, right? There are international guidelines and things in place to keep global order. Now, for the subject of, is Israel an occupying force?
Yeah.
By the definition of the Geneva Convention and the United Nations resolutions, it is by definition an occupying force, right? Any country or any nation that has control over the air, land, and sea of another people, who controls their movement, who restricts their ability to self-determination, who controls what comes in and out of the region, right? That is by definition an occupying entity.
Agreed.
Right? Also, by the Fourth Geneva Convention, Article 49, right? It is illegal for an occupying force to maneuver or relocate people that they occupy from one area to another, which is what they did in the 48 and 67 wars, right? So they essentially snatched up more land, kind of ushered in all of the populations into certain cantons within the West Bank. These are your areas and stuff like that.
Right.
That's an occupation. Also, by law, right, by international law, under that same Fourth Geneva Convention, Article 52, an occupying force has absolutely no right to defend itself from the people from which it occupies.
Wow.
This is a law.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Okay, meaning that if Israel, being the occupying force that it is, right, they have no right to claim self-defense when they're deterring attacks or from the rebellion, from people that are fighting for their freedom and liberation. Okay, so this is a law that has been enshrined in global order for as long as we could remember, and this all kind of was put into place after the atrocities of the Second World War to prevent certain things from transpiring again. So by the definition of the Geneva Convention and United Nations resolutions, right, Israel has no right to self-defense. Why? Because they are the occupying power. They are the people who are, right, oppressing the group of people who are what? In turn resisting that occupation. So with that, the United Nations resolution, the number 52, it says that occupied people are entitled to any form of resistance, okay, for their liberation, including, but not limited to, armed resistance. So we have a very big issue that kind of gets touched on when it comes to the resistance factions, right? You have Hamas, you have Fatah, you have the PFLP from the past. You have all of these different factions that people like to brand as terrorist organizations. Now, who is it that brands them as terrorist organizations? The Western media, right? Sure. If you really look into it and you look at the historical timeline of all other occupied peoples, all of the people that were in essence resisting their occupiers were always labeled as terrorists, right? They were always labeled as degenerates, bad people that you're supposed to be scared of, and that's the same. That's the same here for the Palestinians,
right?
Yeah.
And with the Palestinian movement, people need to understand that Hamas and Fatah and all of this is not a cause, or this is not the cause of the occupation. This is a symptom of the occupation, right? So it's not like the occupation, all of these security measures and all of the restrictions and all of the besiegements, that didn't happen because of the resistance forces. The resistance forces didn't exist at the time Israel had set up all of these restrictions and the strangulation of the Palestinian people. Quite contrarily, the resistance was a creation of necessity because nobody had come in to intervene for the Palestinian people. It was the Palestinian people that took it upon themselves, right, to stand up and fight for what they feel and they know is their right. Same for anybody else across the world.
If this legal precedent, I actually have a question. If this legal precedent is in place, so how is Israel getting around this?
I mean, honestly, this is a question that blows my mind for years. Because if we look at history, any other instance where you have a country that is violating international law, not even blatantly or visually violating, you have instances where in Libya they're claiming, these are claims that human rights violations are taking place, or in Iraq allegations of certain things transpire. When it comes to a country being of the darker colored skin, something like that, very easily do you see action take place, right? But because Israel are the ones that are perpetrating this, and they are the ones that are, we hate to say it, that are financing all of our politicians here and abroad and all of the world's powers, you have a much more restricted route to take. You get what I'm saying? So it's not that people don't know it's occurred, it's that people are kind of reluctant on how to address it.
Right.
And that's a big problem in and of itself, because we see this going on and continuing over and over and over again. And I actually am finishing up a book that I'm writing. It's called The Perils of Silence, right? The global implications of inaction on the Palestinian subject.
Wow.
And what that pretty much touches on is that Israel has been getting away with blatant war crimes for decade after decade. And we're talking about things that any other nation, if they were to go ahead and perpetrate something like this, it wouldn't even be a week, and they would have military intervention, not just with the United States, but all the superpowers abroad. You know what I mean? And what we're seeing now is that you are seeing other nations that are growing brazen, right? They're growing, tough in certain and similar situations right now. You look at India right now, the recent conflict between them and Pakistan. You look at the Kashmir, right? They're trying to occupy Kashmir, trying to annex it out. You have their politicians that are coming out and blatantly saying, hey, if Israel could get away with it, we can too. You know what I mean? So what we have to understand is this is not just something that affects the Palestinian people, right? If we allow this to continue, this is going to set a precedent for the global stage, and the next person, we don't know what they're capable of. You know what I mean? If we allow this to continue and them continuously doing things like this unchecked and with no repercussions, it's gonna lead eventually, whether we like it or not, it's gonna lead to a global chaos.
I mean, one thing I honestly don't like though, and you've said this a couple times, and I just don't like the fact that one thing you said is it's like a racist thing. I mean, I just don't find that to be true. I don't find that to be true on so many fronts. I think it's a self-interest thing.
What do you mean exactly? Like a racist thing?
It's not I don't think they're doing these war crimes, not even parentheses, but war crimes, to the Palestinians as a racist thing.
No, it is.
I would just disagree with that. I would just say it's more of a self-interest of the Jews.
So you haven't seen any of the millions of videos that have been surfacing with all of their, 90% of their public vocalizing their hate for Arabs, comparing them.
Yeah, but then the Arabs, as a whole, the Arabs hate the Jews too. Then
not necessarily though. Not necessarily. So you can.
But the Arabs never get deemed Well, they get deemed anti-Semitic. Yeah. Towards it's that's the dynamic I don't like. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's the racist and you're anti-Semitic. There's so much. But that's everyone really wants to work in their best interest.
Yeah, of course.
So this is what's working for me, and you're kind of trying to either take that from me or manipulate the public based on, and we use these phrases like, anti-Semitic or racist.
I've got a question.
To manipulate the public to get our point across. I think most people are just working in their self-interest.
It is, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Most of the time it is, but I've got a question for you. So you say it's not a racist thing, okay? So let me tell you let me ask you this. Why is it, since their inception of the state of Israel, their main goal was to maintain a majority, right? And the majority means that having a Jewish dominant population within the Israeli territories, right? Now, those Palestinians that were absorbed within the Israeli territories, they were given Israeli citizenship, but by no stretch of the imagination are they considered true Israelis. By no stretch of the imagination
100%,
do they get any of the same rights as the Israelis
100%
of Jewish descent.
Yes.
Now, if you really look at it in that perspective, right, and their whole goal is to minimize non-Jewish, non-Israeli individuals as much as they can by any means that are available to them, how would it not be a racist thing? Because at the end of the day, you could be a Jew of Palestinian descent, you could be a Jew of Iraqi descent, you're gonna get the same hatred. At that point, where is your nationality from, right? They're not showing you the same love that they showed the European Jews, right?
Sure.
That's blatant racism. So right now, you look at the events that are going on, right? And the bombing is from Iran. You look at the bomb shelters. They actually forbid Israeli Jews from entering, the bunkers. You know what I mean? The foreign workers, the non-Jewish Israelis, they don't get that treatment.
Gotcha.
This is a blatant demonstration.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Of racism. Yeah. You know what I mean? They feel and they demonstrate to the world, and they come out and they vocalize it all the time. They feel that they are superior to everybody else.
How many Jews are living within other Arabic states?
Tons. I mean, there's been tons. You have to understand, until the establishment of Israel, Jews were living.
No, of course. Yes, definitely.
And right now, it may be much less in numbers, but you have to understand that when the establishment of Israel occurred, their main goal was to get all of the Jews, as much as they can from around the world, to immigrate to Palestine, right? So although you had Jews that were living comfortably and safely in Iraq and currently in Iran and in Syria and in Lebanon and all of these, Middle Eastern, predominantly Muslim countries, there was never an issue with Jews residing in there. What they did is they demonstrated a need and a sense of urgency that, hey, if you guys are Jews living abroad, you guys are subjected to what's going on, similar to situations to what's going on in Germany. So with doing that, they were able to kind of round up all of the Jews abroad in the diaspora to kind of get them to immigrate to Palestine.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it's not really a matter of how many Jews live over there. Yeah, there may be few in numbers, but that comes because of the reason, that we just mentioned, of the establishment, and they needed to populate it, like I said, to keep a majority, because they wanted it to appear as a democracy, and in order to further their own self-interest, just like what you were saying,
I agree with that.
They needed to have a Jewish majority population.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yes,
so
definitely.
it kind of all breaks down into that same scenario, just like you said, it all boils down to their self-interest, but that self-interest comes with a sense of racism, a sense of superiority, a sense of, entitlement.
Right.
I wanna skip to a question just because for the sake of time, and I want to try to get to the meat. Like I said, I guess I'll pose this to Tim first, and then we'll go to Mo. Is in your opinion, is Hamas fighting for Palestinian freedom, or is it hurting the Palestinian cause? In your opinion,
and
I guess it's a little hard question because you're obviously not Palestinian, but is Hamas fighting for Palestinian freedom? Or is it
pretty much saying, is
cause?
Hamas like helping the cause, or are they hurting the cause?
Well, from my perspective, it sounds like they would be hurting the cause. It sounds like they would be, again, from my perspective, which is probably completely wrong. If it's like if your neighbor wants, we could work together, right? And the more we can work together, we can get along, and we actually don't need to have walls now. We don't need to have, if I say if me and you come in and do an agreement, I do my part, you do your part. Hey, we could live in harmony, right?
Yeah.
The second one person starts to differ from that, then I have to differ from mine. I have to now all of a sudden start protecting myself, and then they protect themselves. And then as that grows, then we're in a full-blown conflict trying to, win the battle. Right. And, so I kind of feel like, again, not that Israel is innocent in any of this, but does Israel, it does seem like, again, from what I've heard, it seems like Hamas is constantly attacking Israel. Maybe, and like you're saying, Israel will defend itself, but they're not allowed to defend themselves. If they're not allowed to defend themselves, what is a country?
There's no self-defense.
Well, what? Okay, there's no maybe claim of self-defense.
Yeah, no. From a legal standpoint,
right? Okay,
you can't.
Let's say, but legal aside, you know what I mean? You come at me, I damn the legal, we're gonna get in a problem. You know what I'm saying? The legal will be dealt with later, but the conflict needs to be dealt with right now. You know what I mean?
It's not a conflict. Right.
Well, okay.
So I'm going to stop you right there.
No, I would agree with you.
Because that is where one of the biggest problems takes place, because a conflict, right, suggests that it's a conflict between two equal forces. That's not the case here. What you have here is an occupying power, an established government, an established nation with the fourth strongest military in the entire world against a group of resistance fighters, of people who are locked away, not given access to any of the human decency or anything that, you know, a basic human being would be entitled to.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So
Okay.
a conflict, that's a big misconception.
Two things with that. I don't disagree at all. But back to my story of I got the brothers and you're coming at me and you keep trying to get me, right? So it's kind of like you're telling me that since we're not equal and I got my brothers behind me, you need to go get your brothers and you need to get weapons. Since I'm stronger, you need to go get weapons. So if I'm Israel and I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, these people keep bombing me with homemade bombs. You're telling me that I'm supposed to let you guys go develop a country, develop an army and a military. And now as Israel, now I have to fight a military.
I mean, at the end of the day.
So they're kind of like, nah, we ain't going to do that. And that's, I would say that would be their perspective, right?
It makes sense. But here's what people are forgetting, right? You can't just start the story from the middle.
No, but let's just, but this is where the story is currently.
No, I know, but still. So what I'm telling you is that it is currently here, but it didn't start here. Right. So touching back on it, right? These resistance groups are a symptom of occupation.
Don't disagree.
There has been numerous attempts, right, by the leaders of the Palestinian nation, the Palestinian people who, you know, the civilians or the people kind of gave the authority to speak on their behalf.
Sure.
There has been numerous attempts to discuss a legitimate, just peace, right, with the help of moderators and mediators such as the United States and England and all of, you know, what have you.
Right.
So this is not something like we're going to touch on it again. It's not something that just popped out of the blue. The reason why you have all of these factions and the resistance to the way it currently is because of the lack of action on Israel's part on keeping their word on deals that were, you know, agreed upon. And number two, the inaction of global leaders that, you know, have a big say in the way the region goes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
So when you have those two things that are being kind of left in the dark and you have a group of people who are constantly being oppressed, you're not leaving much option for anything else, you know, for a route for them to take to shine the light back on themselves. And mind you, these are not so much acts of terrorism, but so much to kind of draw the attention back onto the subject. And if obviously, you know, you don't know too much about, you know, the cause or anything like that, but throughout history, throughout this, you know, the situation between Israel and Palestine, you've had various resistance movements that have, you know, quote unquote done, you know, terroristic things and, you know, violent things. But if you look at the trajectory of how the subject was going at the time, same way every time, right? You know, it gets a little bit of attention. Then they do a good job at suppressing it. Then the Palestinian issue and the Palestinian people kind of dissolve. Then it takes something else to happen, right? It takes another violent form of resistance, right? A violent armed type of resistance, an action to kind of draw the attention back up. It gets people talking about, okay, well, yeah, we kind of forgot about it, but now that we, you know, the light is back on there, let's see how we could get a resolution for this problem. Same thing happened year in and year out. And you've had the same situations occur over and over and over. And right now, what we have that's happening that hasn't had, you know, that was not available in the past is the availability of information, right?
Yeah.
The rapid transmission of information, right? So in the past, Israel did such a great job at suppressing the information. Why? Because they controlled all of legacy media, all of the, you know, the mainstream news channels, all of the newspapers and stuff like that. Right away, they would shut it down. Within a week or two, nobody would even be discussing it anymore. Right now, right? October 7th, they want to keep saying October 7th, as if this is where the whole
they start the story there. Yeah,
right?
They do. Yeah, 100%.
When it happened, right, on October 7th, the amount of information that was being spread literally spun them into like a frenzy. They didn't know what the heck to do.
Yeah, losing control of the narrative.
They had no idea what to do because there was so much information that was being shared and being made available to like billions of people, essentially. So right now, what we're witnessing is we're witnessing the first live streamed massacre, right, I'd like to call it a genocide because they voiced their intentions, right? The leaders of the Israeli government, those in power, have not shied away from their goals or what their aspirations are, right? So me being a Palestinian, being very, very well aware of all of those in power and all of their aspirations and what they want to accomplish, I know very well they want it to be a genocide. They want to kill all the Palestinians. If they could, they would do it without hesitation. Just the other day, we had one of their Knesset members, one of their ministers, came out. He said, we've gotten to the point where we killed 100 Palestinian children in one night and nobody said a word. He said, we're getting closer and closer to the point where we could just exterminate all of them. You know what I mean? It's been almost 2 years and people are becoming desensitized to just witnessing beheaded children, dismembered bodies, women, elderly, just being slaughtered, waiting for food.
Much of the problems just have been blown up. You're starving, or
it's absolutely
sick,
unacceptable.
all these things.
And what we have right now is the information is becoming so available to everybody that people that were on the fence about it, people that had no knowledge of it, all it took was 1 year. 1 year. You're talking about 76 years, right, of the establishment of Israel, and it took just 1 year to have people actually be aware and be awoken to what is actually going on, right? And make the right stand and stand on the right side of justice.
Sure. I do agree. There's they're saying out there, it says every time Israel does something, it's a tactical strike. Every time Palestine does anything, it's a terrorist attack.
Exactly,
so there is obviously manipulation in there. It's a massive bias when it comes to those things. One big question I have is, well, let's go on. I'll talk about it in a minute.
Okay, no problem. So let me segue into this then. Is there a moral equivalence between Israeli airstrikes and Palestinian rocket attacks?
No, absolutely not. There's no equivalence between that because, like I said, and I'm going to keep mentioning it, is you have one side who is the oppressor, right? Who is the military aggressor, who has all of the capabilities at their disposal, who has all of the resources, who controls the air, land, and sea, who controls the people of Palestine, right? So on one side, you have this big monstrous entity who is by law, right, required to care for those people that they are occupying. They never cared for the people that they're occupying. In fact, they actually create their lives and make it much worse day by day. Their goal is to kind of create an environment which is so unlivable, to kind of force them and just want to, give up on the resistance. So when you have a group of Palestinian resistance fighters, right, a form of militia, armed resistance, that kind of gather together and fire back a rocket as a form of resistance, right? It's not the same, because with that one rocket that more than likely is not going to hit or do any type of damage, right? You have numerous rockets coming back down, and you're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of casualties, most of them innocent civilians, which Israel doesn't care. You know what I mean? They've demonstrated over and over again. They don't really care who they attack. And mind you, let's go and touch back on, the resistance part, because this is something that people don't know. That you have the armed factions of resistance, right? You have Fatah, you have the PFLP, you have Hamas, you have various resistance factions in Palestine. And what people don't understand is we actually have countless times tried nonviolent protests, right? In 2018-19, people don't know this, the Great March on Gaza. People don't know about this, right?
I don't know about this.
In Gaza, right? Because of the besiegement and the restriction on what could come in, what can't come, what could go out, the controlling of their power, their water sources, the coastline, they can't go and fish. They wanted to organize some type of protest to kind of say, hey, we want this to change. So every Friday after Friday prayer from March to December of 2018, every Friday, they would go march by the thousands to the border of the Gaza Israeli cage, if you will. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Unarmed, peaceful protest. You know what the Israelis did? They killed them. They picked them off. There was over 300, close to 300 innocent, unarmed, peaceful protesters that were killed for protesting.
Right.
You know what I mean? So people want to come and say, oh, well, why don't you guys try other routes? Everything has been tried.
Right.
Every route that you guys could possibly think of has been tried. It's just nobody knows about it. Why? Because this subject has been shushed and brushed under the carpet for so long that now all that people are being exposed to is October 7th.
Sure.
You know, like, oh,
Let me ask you a question about October 7th. Do you think Israel allowed that to happen?
I mean, I can't say if they allowed it to happen, right? But
It's kind of sketch.
Yeah, it is kind of sketch, right? So what I do feel is a definite possibility is that they, you know, them being the intelligence leader of the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that they had some type of knowledge of it, right? And what people don't understand is that Netanyahu, he's been fighting a case within his own government since 2018, 2019, right? And
before this popped off, he was about to be out of there.
No, So he's just been constantly creating conflict and delaying because he knows the minute that he actually has to go before
he's out.
the judge,
or he's going to jail or something.
he's good. He's 100% going to get arrested.
Right.
Corruption charges, you know what I mean? Like the list goes on and on.
Sure.
There's actually a documentary which was released. It's called the BB Files. The BB Files. And this covers that whole case of his and all of the things that led up to it, all of the accusations, and it kind of touches into like the October 7th thing. So it was set to release before it happened. They pushed it back a little bit and then they kind of added in and showed that, hey, if they did have knowledge of it, this was just merely a plan for him to
like
kind of,
flag.
you know what I mean? Just to kind of prolong his position in power.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds, in my opinion, if I were to look at it, you know, again, I'm not saying this is the case or not, but, you know, when we look at like what happened with 9/11, what greater motivation for a country to back the idea of war than to have an attack on your own home soil?
Exactly. Yeah.
So if Israel did know that this was going to happen, what is the ultimate excuse to be able to retaliate?
Exactly.
Is to allow something like that to happen.
Retaliate and the means and the way that they did, right? So their goal, in my opinion, right, and this is all speculation.
Of course,
right?
of course.
Yeah.
So my opinion is that Netanyahu knew he was getting ready to, you know, fall. He was getting ready to fall hard. They maybe had some knowledge of these October 7th things that were getting planned. They already, you know, Egypt already came out and said that, hey, we already let Israel know, we gave them intelligence that this was getting planned.
Let it happen.
Right? So in my opinion, what happened is, okay, we're going to use this as a justification. We're going to go in and bomb the hell out of these Palestinians. We're going to take over all of Gaza.
Yeah.
And then the Israeli population, they're going to love me because we just seized a whole new waterfront property for the settlers. Right? So in my opinion, that's kind of, you know, like what transpired, right?
If that's the case, bro. It's pretty sick.
But here's what happened is that they were not expecting Hamas to be as prepared as they were. Maybe they did have some knowledge of some type of attack imminent, right? But they didn't understand what was going to come with that attack. They didn't understand how it was going to happen. They didn't understand, you know, the severity or, you know, the extent of what they had planned or what they were able to kind of sustain. So rather than an easy cleanup in his mind, it turned out to blow up into a much broader and much heavier, you know, assault.
Right.
On both sides. Right. Yeah. So now you have the Israeli side. This guy kind of declared a state of emergency. Oh, we're going to put all of that stuff on pause. We need to take care of our people first. Yeah. Right. Our main goal is to eliminate Hamas. They're enemy number one. Not me. They're enemy number one. Right. I'm not your enemy. I'm not, you know, the corrupt guy who's been dragging Israel into, you know, the abyss for, you know, and you want to talk about dictatorship. This guy's been in power for like 40 years.
Time.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like this guy, you want to talk about dictatorship. This is the furthest thing from a democracy. You want to talk about democracy. These guys are the most opposite of a democracy.
Yeah. Another question I have, what do you think about, again, you know, what I've heard is, you know, they hide military weapons, these type of things in schools, in apartment buildings, in hospitals. And then Israel finds out this intelligence, blows up the hospitals because, again, this is where they're saying that this is where the resistance is coming from. And then Hamas turns around and says, oh my God, why would you do that? Why would you kill our innocents? But it's kind of like, you know, it does seem kind of manipulative to be putting stuff in civilian areas where you know they're going to be civilian targets. And it's like holding your wife in front of you and saying, hey, don't shoot me.
Shield,
you know what I mean? The human shield, exactly. Do you think that's true that they're doing that? And then also if they are doing that, I mean, would you agree that that's probably still wrong?
I mean, if anybody were to do something like that, I would agree it's wrong.
Okay.
And just to stop you right there, it's actually been proven that all of those claims by Israel have been proven to be incorrect, right?
okay.
By various international human rights organizations, the most prominent one being Amnesty International. These people are led into the war zones and conflict zones all the time, and they're able to go ahead and do their investigations and determine whether or not these claims are substantiated or not.
Yeah.
And every single time and time again, they went in, they say, hey, these are bogus claims. The tunnels that they're claiming that were underneath that specific Al-Shifa hospital, these tunnels were tunnels that they themselves built under there. Right. So these were tunnels, that specific, thing of tunnels was under the hospital, which they built. So they knew that specific area for a fact because they were the ones that put it there. Yeah. Now, as far as it being a stronghold for Hamas, weapons, supplies, storage, whatever that is, that's never been the case. Each one of these claims, time and time again, have been debunked within a matter of, like it used to be months it would take for them to be debunked. Right now, it takes, about a week.
Right.
About a week, these international organizations who go put their lives on the line for no benefit other than, to benefit humanity. Right? They go and put their lives on the line, and they're the ones that come out and say, you know what, we can't substantiate any of this nonsense that Israel is saying.
Gotcha.
So for one, I would say that, somebody who does that is probably not a correct way to go about it. It would be a very, very bad way to operate in a conflict, or let's not say conflict, in a battle, if you will. But it has never been substantiated, right?
Right.
Secondly, if you were aware of the news recently with the barrage of missiles coming in from Iran, they demonstrate. They showed a video. They themselves have military bases underneath their hospitals. There's videos circulating of their own. So in an effort to draw sympathy, they are exposing themselves. Right. So in an effort to draw sympathy, look at where we're forced to go, and they have all of their military personnel. And where are they? Underneath the hospital.
Interesting.
Right. So there's a saying, as a Palestinian growing up, right, we were taught this. They say, for every accusation Israel makes, is actually a confession.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's typical people, though.
It is.
That's
right?
typical people.
So growing up, we were saying, we were taught, if you want to find out what Israel does,
just listen to them.
No, go ask them what the Palestinians do to you.
If
you want to find out what they do to the Palestinians, just ask them what do the Palestinians do to you.
Right.
And they'll start naming a list of things, and each one of those things are things that they themselves have been found guilty on. Right. The raping of women.
Right.
The killing of children. The extrajudicial executions. The list goes on and on, man. You know what I mean? And right now we're living in the time where it's the era of technology and information, right? So you have people that'll come out and they'll still have the balls to tell you, no, you're wrong. And like, man, do you understand? I have the internet. It takes like less than a minute, and I could find out exactly what the truth is, right? So all of these things have just been getting debunked, and it feels like Israel has lost their ability to deceive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In my opinion, as a faithful person, I feel that God had, he gave them that ability. He wanted to see how long they're going to continue using this, like
it only lasts so long.
And he pulled it from them. You know what I mean? Like they used to be so easily able to deceive people and manipulate their opinions. And now they could say anything. Like people are just looking at them like, I don't believe you.
Yeah.
Like I don't.
It's kind of like we feel about the Democratic Party. It's like, no, you can't believe nothing they say.
It's like, you know what, bro? You can keep talking all you want.
Exactly.
But I am not going to believe anything you say.
Agreed.
You know what I mean?
Agreed.
So they put themselves in a situation right now, and that constant aggression and that constant sense of superiority that, hey, we could do whatever the heck we want, and nobody's gonna do a thing to us. And why? Because they have like their whole playbook.
Control,
they have the Holocaust playbook, right? The victim card. That's their number one thing. But now people are getting tired of it. Why? Because one oppression doesn't justify another.
Agreed with that.
You know what I mean? Just because we're not saying that it was okay what happened to them, but what we are saying is that because that happened to them, it does not give them
the right to do it,
or the right to go ahead and impose that same suffering on another group of people.
Sure.
You know?
I do want to piggyback one point because, I mean, from my perspective, again, I'm not saying this is the case or not, but if I was looking at it from Israel's point of view and I was looking at it from a strategic point of view, and I was making these claims that Hamas or whatever is storing weapons in these entities, and my goal was to cripple the civilization.
Of course,
and
That
I
would
get
be
to
the perfect
justify
cover.
exactly like
Perfect
I'm
cover.
justifying like, oh, I'm hitting this hospital because there's weapons there, but I'm also hitting this hospital because I don't want them to be able to
Exactly,
heal people
yeah.
and like
You want them
take care of them, or whatever, school, whatever. So I mean, that it's just a perspective that I have on it in regards to that matter because
I read something today.
Yeah.
I had read something today that there's not one fully operational
they've
hospital
targeted
in all of Gaza.
100% of all the hospitals. And the reason why
every single one.
The reason why this strikes me right now is because I was just browsing earlier today, and the Iranian barrage hit one of the hospitals.
Iranian hospitals.
And they want
Israeli
hospital, and they want to make it seem like it's a civilian hospital when in reality this was a IDF, exclusive hospital for the IDF, right? So it was a strategic, target from Iran. But what's funny is that these guys came out and they're sitting there and talking about they targeted a hospital. This is a violation of international law,
right?
And this and that. And then you just browse through the comments and everybody's like just naming every single hospital that you guys have destroyed.
Right.
Wow.
They're like, okay, well, what about you guys?
Yeah,
so now the paradox is becoming more and more visible, and now people are starting to realize that, hey, you guys have been doing this for so long, and now it's happening to you guys, and you guys want sympathy from us. Like, it doesn't work that way.
Sure, right.
You have to practice what you preach.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
I want to get to one of your questions, Mo. It's an interesting one. What would this situation look like if it were happening in Ukraine or South Africa during the apartheid?
I mean, a situation like that coming from that part of the world is going to be a little bit different.
Okay.
Right? It's going to be a little bit different because, in my opinion, you have the land of Palestine being so sensitive as a topic, right? From all of the religious standpoints, right? It's a very, very touchy and very coveted piece of land.
For sure.
Right? So the group of people that you have there, you're going to have people that are saying, oh, it's because of the faith, it's because of religion, it's because of this, it's because of that. What's going on in Palestine is purely about superiority, right?
Okay.
It's about dominance.
Okay.
It's about ethno-supremacism.
Okay.
That's what it is. They want to dominate and they want to have that land for themselves. Now, let's say in Ukraine, you have Europeans against other Europeans that are claiming their stake to the land, right? It's an internal conflict, more what you will, right? South Africa is a little bit more touchy because you have the Europeans that came in over there against the indigenous population, and they had their conflict and their, the beef that they had. So I would say between the two, the parallel would be closest to the one in South Africa because you had the indigenous population, you had the European settlers that came in that kind of took over.
I could see that.
Displaced them, kind of put them in positions to where they were not able to access the same rights as any human being of their, the fair shade of color or whatever, right? So we've seen it happen. We've seen the struggle. We've seen the fight between the two, and we've seen all of the bloodshed that occurred with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not something that any nation should have to go through. It's not something that's going to be pretty, right? All revolutions, all liberations are always bloody. Unfortunately, throughout history, there hasn't been a single bloodless liberation. You know what I mean? We had the opportunity here in the United States during the Civil War, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that kind of had its own twist to it as well, and touch of violence. But our main thing is when you have an opposition that is not willing to come to the table open-heartedly and justly, there is no room for conversation, right? There's no room for conversation. At the end of the day, you're just sending me to talk to, pretty much you're sending the bullied to talk to the bully for justice. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So throughout history, that's kind of been what the situation was. We come to the UN, we come to international powers and say, hey, these people are doing this. They're not giving us our agreed upon rights. Oh, well, we can't do anything.
You got to talk to them about it.
Go talk to Israel. Like, okay, so how where does that leave us? It's kind of a cycle. It's been cyclical over and over again, right? We go talk to them, they shut us down. From home demolitions, from restriction of movement, from the expanding of settlements, right? The theft of land. It just keeps piling up, and then eventually, what you get is a group of Palestinians, a group of people who are just so fed up for asking for help, that we're gonna take this into our own hands. And unfortunately, this is what we see. Happen now. You know what I mean? It's an armed resistance. They're well within their rights. We are well within our rights to fight for justice, to fight for our land. And the Geneva Convention, the Fourth Geneva Convention, it had a stipulation for the right of return, which means that all of the people that were displaced in 48, all 700,000 plus Palestinian people were supposed to have the right of return, which means that after everything was done and settled, the dust settles, the violence kind of stopped, the Palestinians were going to be required to be able to come back to their homes.
Yeah.
That's never been. There's actually been more Palestinians kicked out with that right of return than there is people permitted. Like I have family right now that they can't, as Palestinians, they can't even go. They can't even go visit their homeland, right? So I have people, even American citizen friends of mine who are Palestinian, they go over there. It's not even guaranteed you're going to get in, right? They'll look at you, they'll do an analysis, they'll try, look you up from head to toe, and they'll make a decision whether they're going to let you in or not.
Oh, wow.
That's not justice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they want to keep framing it as like, oh, we're these innocent victims and stuff like that. But if you really look at the whole situation, it's very easy to see what the true situation is.
Let me ask you, what do you think? So again, what would you want? So you would want the Palestinians just to be able to live within the within Israel, and then would you want to displace Israeli current Jews so the Palestinians can move back into that land?
So here's my kind of where my thoughts are, right? With a lot of my readings, a lot of scholars that I've kind of studied and stuff like that. At this point, the only thing that hasn't been attempted was the two-state solution.
Okay.
Right? In my opinion, it's far too late for that. Far too late for a two-state solution. Why? Because the same concept you had about two neighbors, you're going to have one right here and one right here. One's clear. This is mine. This is mine.
Right.
Right? We're going to have that conflict. It's going to be, emboldened. It's going to be inflamed, especially this long after it was supposed to have occurred.
Sure.
What I see the future of Palestine happening, right? Or happening in the future of Palestine is the current state of Israel as the fascist, racist regime that it currently is has to be dismantled. A new one government on all of historic Palestine should be established, allowing both Palestinians and Jews and Christians and whoever the heck else, okay, that's living there, to establish a one nation, one person, one vote country. Okay? At that point, and it's already been said, so you have a lot of people that say, oh, well, what if this does happen? Hamas is going to want to kick all the Jews out, or, this and that. And these are discussions you have to understand. These are very intellectual discussions and topics that have already been broached long ago.
Oh, yeah,
right?
definitely. Yeah.
So this is not something that's, it's going to happen. Oh, they're going to have to put together a plan. No, it's already been discussed as a possibility. And one thing that's been, made known is that as the Palestinian people, we don't seek to kick anybody out, but we do seek to have equal rights for everybody that's on this land.
Okay, so if Muslims came in and let's say, what I would assume that Jews want to keep control, right? Yeah. Which anyone does. Basically, this is a battle of control, right?
And that's why they don't want a two-state solution or any type of solution.
Because but you could also agree why they would not want that.
You could, but
because so you're going to be a one vote. I'm sitting here as a white American, and I have an Egyptian and a Palestinian, right? You guys could get together
and say two votes,
one vote against one vote, and I'm out. Right?
Yeah.
So with that being said, I know that there's that possibility. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to handicap you guys because I know that that's a possibility.
Okay.
So that's like, you could just see a country being like in a group of people saying like, I understand what you're saying and maybe we should do that. Yeah. But the possibility of you guys collaborating and now I'm losing all my power, which I kind of like and I kind of want, and I'm not going to give up, which is what any government does. Any government on every government on every retain their power, right? Because if they don't, then Russia could come in, or North Africa or South Africa is going to get taken over. All these, Mexico could take over America. No, these are our borders, and we're willing to defend it, right? Because we don't want to be taken over. So I can understand why Israel is like, that doesn't work.
But then you can't sit here and cry when you guys have armed resistance. You get what I'm saying? So it's like coming and poking the bear, right? Poke the bear, nothing happened the first time. Then you come around, you poke it again, and it turns around and gets aggressive, and then You come in, you kind of push the bear out of its natural habitat. You kind of create an isolated area, and you're sitting there provoking the bear. The bear is trying to just get access to its normal habitat.
Yeah.
Right? You can't sit there and say, oh, well, we don't want that because this bear is too dangerous. No, this is a result of the current policies and the way they've been operating.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You know what I mean?
But,
So that hasn't worked. This is my point. My point is that strategy has not worked.
Right.
It's only inflamed and made things much, much worse through the years. So
Agreed.
From that point of view is they have to, okay, for their own self-interest, right? They have to take a step back and say, hey, we're facing one of two things, right? What are those two things? Either complete expulsion or what? Collaboration.
Right.
Right? You get what I'm saying? So from a common sense point of view, a person should be able to look at their actions and say, okay, my actions up until this point have led to XXX, right? It's led to constant conflict, constant aggression, constant death, constant war, right? And yet they want to try to continue that with moving forward. You know what I mean? A person with common sense should take a step back and say, you know what? This isn't working. We have to come up with a more viable solution.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple, right?
Right.
And with that solution, right, with those options, unfortunately, it's going to be some things that are maybe not in their favor. But with that is they have two options. They could either continue to live in that sense of fear or sense of, urgency or, with that hate within themselves, or be willing to kind of compromise a little bit and negotiate with the people that welcome them into their country, right? And then establish a country that is what? Maybe not exactly to their liking, to what they want from all the bells and whistles, but it's going to be somewhere that they could live in peace.
It's like a compromise in marriage.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, definitely don't disagree with that. I'm just saying, I just don't see how that happens if a country is constantly, if you feel that I've constantly done you wrong.
That's the thing. Media has portrayed us as like these savages, right?
Of course, yeah, which is wrong.
They painted us as these savages, these vengeful people that we're just out to, like, our main mission is just to wake up and kill Jews.
Right.
Right? This is unfortunately what they painted us as.
100%.
They don't understand that we're like a very kind people, right?
Sure.
We're human
I can guarantee that.
right?
Yeah,
We're people of life. We teach life, right?
Yeah.
We teach appreciation. Our whole ideology and our whole faith is based off of appreciation, respect, loyalty. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Unwavering faith to God.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? If you were to understand that and you were to see the people that have welcomed them in, right, during the 40s, during that time of World War II where they were fleeing, you would see that these people can be worked with, right? Like you could see that.
Right.
Even with all of these aggressions, even with all of the slaughter, there are still very prominent people in the Palestinian resistance and the Palestinian communities that come out and they're willing to talk. We're willing, like they show it. But Israel does a great job at killing them. Why? Because here's a tactic that Israel also has: is they like to target anyone who is about peace. They don't want peace, right? So when you have a voice that is promoting peace and coming to the table open-heartedly, open-mindedly, trying to develop a just resresolution, they don't want that.
Yeah.
They don't want, why? Because then they can't say, oh, well, they don't want peace, right? They're saying, then it's going to be made clear that Israel, are not the ones that, are the ones that don't want peace. Right? So whenever you have a person like that, just recently, Ismail Haniyeh, one of the political leaders of Hamas, they assassinated. He was the one, even with the constant aggression that was going on in Gaza and the thousands, he was the voice. He said, we can make something happen.
Right.
You know what I mean, he was coming out, he's saying, they don't want that.
Yeah,
when he got assassinated. Let me just feel. When he got assassinated, and then the leader of the military wing, right, Yahya Sinwar, took that seat. It was gold for them. Why?
Right.
Because they knew that this guy, he was like he's no punk.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's not gonna just bend over.
Right.
He's gonna. So what it was a heaven sent for them. Why? Because they knew that he was gonna fight.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's what they want. That's how they justify the continuance of the aggression and the continuous of the slaughter.
Yeah.
So they've always demonstrated that they're not peaceful people. Even Trump in his last term, right, his first term, he ended up coming out, and after a couple of meetings with Netanyahu, he came out and it was a voice recorded. He said, man, he's like, I thought the Palestinians didn't want peace. He was like, but it's like Netanyahu. He's like, that mother don't want peace, right? The president, right? The president came out and said that. So that just shows you to the point at which they want to, you know, like they want to keep things going to keep their power, right?
Yeah.
They don't want peace. They don't want justice. They want things to continue as they are, the status quo. You know what I mean? They rule. The Palestinians do, you know what I mean, do nothing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I you know, if I took that logical solution or situation, I said like, okay, the guys that want peace, and let's say we lower our guard and we allow that peace to happen, which we don't really want, because if we do allow peace, then either a two-state solution comes up into play or integration comes into play. And with integration comes into play, we risk losing our power.
Yeah.
So if we risk that, then integration is not an option because we're risking losing our power. So what's the easiest thing to do, and we're kind of tired of these fools, so let's just continue to oppress them either until they leave or until they do an October 7th, which will justify to do this. I mean, that scenario actually makes sense. You know what I mean? On a logical state of why things are happening.
So that's been their strategy. And you got to understand, these people, right? This is not something that has just been thought up.
Oh, no.
This is something that has
these are very smart people. Yeah.
Plotted and plotted and planned.
Yes.
For, you know, like hundreds of years, right? And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Theodor Herzl, right? Theodor Herzl is the father, what they consider the father of modern Zionism. He was born in late 19th century in Austria, German region, right? He was a journalist of Jewish descent, mind you, but he self-declared atheist.
Gotcha.
He wrote a book called Der Judenstaat, which translates to the Jewish state. Now, in this book, he takes and he pulls from a lot of Jewish teachings and Talmudic scripture and stuff like that in regards to the Jewish people. His ideology was that the Jews were expected to assimilate in Europe, right? When they went ahead and immigrated over to that region. And what he found is that it was not happening, right? The Jews were not assimilating into the society which they were inhabiting, right? So he felt the only safe place or the only logical thing would be for the Jews to have their own state. Now, in his book, he continues to argue about why it is essential for the Jews to have their own state, to avoid persecution for, you know, certain things that they do or whatever, right? That they caught doing time and time again. And what's funny is in this book, he doesn't declare Palestine like right away, right? It's between two choices. This is what people don't understand, right? So in his book, the destination is between two places, one of them being Palestine, and the second one was Argentina. Strange, right? It was like talk about other side of the world, right? And his argument, when you go into it, you find that his reasoning was that Palestine would be a much easier sell because we have the Jewish connection to 100%, biblical ties. And mind you, this is a self-proclaimed atheist who doesn't believe in God, yet he's going to come and tell you that God promised him this land 3,000 years ago. Like, how imbecilic does a person have to be to sit there and try to convince someone else something like that? Like, that's like me telling you, like, yeah, I don't believe in God, man, but yeah, God looks out for me all the time.
Well, you could see the argument of why the Jews it'd be an easier sell.
Yeah, that's what it was.
That's what his basic thing is. Like, it's a very easy.
All of the leaders that came after him, and right now in Israel, you go, they've done surveys. You know, you're talking about like 85 to 92% of all Israelis are atheists. They don't believe.
Yeah, that's true.
They don't believe in God.
Very high
percentage. Yeah, you go in there, you talk to these people, and this is where God's chosen. How are you God's chosen? You just said
it's paradoxical.
You don't believe in God. How did God promise you this land, and how are you God's chosen people?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's all hiding behind, you know what I mean, the masquerade of Judaism, right? They have the veil of Judaism in front, and then in the back they don't have any beliefs of what the teachings are.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's a big conflict right now. That's why you have, like I said, tens of thousands of Jews, if not hundreds of thousands globally, that will like refuse to ever go visit Israel, don't support Israel, Zionism at all. Right, is X'd off from their beliefs, and people are beginning to realize that the difference between Zionism and Judaism is
night and day.
Grand, you know what I mean? Sure. Like, it's not the one is a political ideology,
yes,
and one is a faith.
Right.
right? So they're two totally separate things.
Totally.
And right now, like everything that you say or criticize, like you're saying, you criticize Israel, oh, you're anti-Semitic, everything anti-Semitic.
Yeah, it's not fair. Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Why is it we're allowed to, why do we have here in the United States laws protecting the criticism of Israel, and yet we could criticize our own country here in the United States? Like,
Right.
how does
How does it make sense?
that make? I don't even understand it. I've been sitting here.
AIPAC's a good lobby, baby.
It is. And only AIPAC, they've got sister.
No, they do.
companies.
Yes,
Yeah,
they
you
got
know
a
what I
bunch.
mean?
Yes.
And right now, AIPAC has such high heat on it right now.
Oh yeah, it's
They
huge.
have their sister companies that are dumping money right
Yeah.
now, right? I have a couple of the names that I found out in my research, right? I'll share them with you guys,
Okay.
right? But their sister companies, those are the big steppers now,
Mhm.
because AIPAC kind of took a step back. Now they're sister companies. So now you're looking at financial spending and political contributions. You have to look for these the other names.
Sure.
Right? So
Yeah.
AIPAC in and of itself, since they were created,
Yeah.
they've always had that smoke screen, right?
Yeah.
They were required, or they were being pressured to register under the FARA Act, right? The Foreign Agents Registration Act by JFK.
Mhm.
And what that is it's a regulation that pretty much puts any group of people who are sitting in Washington lobbying on behalf of a foreign nation, it pretty much puts all of their actions on paper.
Yes.
It's full
Yeah, I've heard
transparency.
of that. Yeah.
It limits what they can spend, who they could contact, and what means they could communicate with people.
Right.
Right. And all nations around the world have been required to register under that
Yes.
Foreign Agent Registration Act. The only group of people
Or-
that were able to kind of slither around it
right.
were AIPAC, right? AIPAC. And they come out and they brag about it.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
They say we just spent 150 million on your guys' election. They don't say
Right.
ours.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that tell you? That tells you that they're
Oh,
from
they're
the
lobbying
outside,
our
right?
country. Yeah. Yeah.
That
There's no
tells you,
question.
because if they were from within, they say we just spent 100 million on our election.
Right.
They wouldn't come out and say I just spent
Yours.
100 million on your elections,
Mhm.
right? That's like a spit in the face. Like we buy your politicians.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I
You know
don't
what I
disagree
mean?
with that.
You have politicians that are coming out blindly. They just like have a script and they're just repeating, whatever the hell they say.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys seen the Tucker Carlson.
Yeah. The Ted Cruz. Yeah. Oh, brutal.
Like, bro, how
Brutal.
can you come out
Brutal.
and just sit across
Yeah.
from someone who you know is going to
Yeah.
hammer you like this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Tucker's a G.
It is.
Yeah.
And this is someone who was very on the opposite side of where he is right now.
Oh, for
You know
sure.
what I mean?
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
pro-Israel.
Well, again, he's been very propagandized. You
Yeah.
know, a lot of, I don't know.
90%.
Do you, who else do you follow?
I know you
Like
put
on
up
Western
Candace
media,
Owens
do you like,
Yeah, Candace Owens, cool. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I don't have any like specific people. All of these people that were made aware to me that their views have changed
Yeah.
were just by chance. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like browsing through Instagram or something like that, you kind of start seeing just a little bit of the way they choose their words.
Mhm.
The shift in the way that they're thinking, right? It's
Yeah.
maybe start with like, okay, maybe they are, violating internet. And then now, after 20 months of just blatant lies that, the Israeli government is telling our country here
Mhm.
and trying to drag us into yet another catastrophic war,
Yeah. I
Right?
definitely don't
people
agree
are
with
asking
this.
questions now.
Yeah. Oh,
You know what I
100%.
mean? And mind you, this is the same, like they're trying to drag the United States into a war with Iran,
Iran,
right? This
yep.
is the same bomb that Iran has been making since 1982.
Yeah, yeah,
You know
right.
what I
Whole
mean?
time, yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Like this guy Netanyahu has a playbook, and that playbook it's not
He's trying to
deviated.
execute it.
They don't
Yeah.
deviate from
Yeah.
it, right? It's the same script.
Yep.
It's the same logic. It's the same fear mongering.
Mhm.
It's the same stupidity,
Yeah.
right? But now, like people are looking at him, and they're like, you know what?
Yeah.
I don't trust this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and the saying of now it's a nuke or they're going to have this weapons of mass destruction.
Come on, yeah.
Man, we played that in Iraq.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
Yeah.
and,
You know,
unfortunately,
and a
so
lot
many-
of people are like,
if you really calculate, right, there's been studies that were done in regards to the United States undying and unwavering support of Israel and their conflicts and their agenda. It has costed the United States upward of $14 trillion
Yeah.
since their inception, and that's just aside from their the aid that they've single-handedly collected. Them from 1948 have collected more aid than all other countries in the world, and they've only been around for a fraction.
yeah. Not to mention the lack of American lives
Yeah, you know what
lost
I mean?
in all these
Yeah,
conflicts
yeah.
too.
No,
you
that's
know?
like the big thing. So
Yeah.
they're dragging.
So that's that's my biggest thing.
That's my main
is-
topic is that they are ones to kind of drag us in there, right?
Yeah.
You don't see them sending any of their soldiers in.
Yeah. I don't
You
want
don't- they're
my
quick to
boys
come-
fighting for that.
Yeah,
Absolutely
they're
not.
quick to come and say, "Oh well, these guys are your enemies because 1, 2, 3, and we need you guys to send your guys to fight because this is what we believe is going to be best for everyone.
Right.
Why don't you guys send your soldiers? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's been time and time again, countless American lives have been lost for absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Absolutely nothing.
That's my
Nothing.
problem.
Nothing has been gained. No war has been won. Just catastrophe and global chaos. You know, one region to the next.
Yep.
And it's just their goal is to create chaos in the whole region so that they can be the only big players.
What was the strategy where America and Israel, we're going to topple Iraq?
Yeah, it was the seven.
Libya.
It was the 7 countries in 5 years.
And then the last one was Iran, and then slowly.
So it was.
And then now look at us.
It was Iraq,
Libya, Syria,
Iran. No, Libya,
Syria,
Sudan,
Iraq.
Sudan, Somalia, Iraq, and
Might have been Yemen.
I'm not sure if Yemen was. It was Libya, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, Iraq, Iran. Yeah, it might have been Yemen too.
I think it was Yemen,
Yeah,
and then Iran. And Iran was the only one that we haven't, you know.
And mind you, Netanyahu right now,
with
he
it.
just did a couple of interviews not too long ago. He's already talking about post-Iran. He says after Iran, he says our next focus should be what? You could guess it, I'm sure. Pakistan. Right? Because they actually have nukes. Right? They have nuclear weapons. This was an interview done just months ago. He said after Iran,
I didn't hear that, but
we need to dedicate our focus to Pakistan. We can't allow these Islamic radicalist countries to have and possess these type of weapons. Like, bro, people are still falling for this.
Right.
You know what I mean? And people are not. You know, people are actually resisting now. People, you know, you could read about it in the Trump administration. You have a lot of pushback. You have half his administration that are for it, right? Funded by AIPAC.
Yep.
And then you have the other ones that are true American patriots that are saying, you know
They're
what?
like, nah.
They're like, screw this, dude.
Yeah,
They're like,
exactly.
we're
No
not
more foreign
we're
wars.
not gonna go do Iraq 2.0. Dude.
Oh.
Yeah.
They're like, this is not Yemen. This is not. They're talking
Especially
about
Iran.
Yeah, they're like, you're talking
92
about Iran.
million people. I mean, come on now.
You're
this is
talking
all-
about Iran, man. You're talking about like this is no small potato.
No,
Right.
not at all.
So
and who's going to occupy it once it's done?
Exactly.
It's going to create a civil war. It's going to create. It's going to. Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a disaster.
You know, same thing, right?
100%.
So you have these same things kind of happening back to back.
But what America likes to do, and I think with the colonization of Israel, is we like to topple the dictator and then put someone that we could control in there to do, you know,
they would do the work.
to do the dirty work.
And just to clarify too, it was Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran.
Okay, yeah. So it was Yemen in there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it? No. It was Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran.
Yeah, no, but the one we were missing was.
Oh.
What you said, Yemen?
No.
Yemen's not in there. Oh, interesting.
So it's Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia.
Oh, Lebanon.
Sudan, and-
Lebanon. Okay, yeah.
Lebanon was, yeah. So I actually want to kind of bring it back to this because you mentioned it earlier. So how do you respond to the idea that the anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic? From that, statement.
I don't like that statement.
Yeah.
You know, I don't like. You know, I'm over their whole racism thing. I'm over the whole like
victim card,
like all of it, on all the takes, you know, from all the different things. Like, I'm just tired of it. You know what I mean? It's played out and it's all been overused.
It is.
You know what I mean? But the anti-Semitic thing's been way overused too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Look, if you're an asshole, you're an asshole. If your group's an asshole, your group's an
it doesn't
asshole.
matter if you're Jewish, Muslim, Christian, or
But
what.
just because you're part of a group, that doesn't mean that you're
like that's why you're an asshole.
Yeah, right, exactly. Or that even you're part of that group.
Exactly.
Like I'm a represent a white man. I'm not a racist guy. You know, I mean, so when people say, "Oh, all white men are racist," it's like, well, I'm not, and you know, and I don't want to be a part of that group. I think it's just, I think racism is such a stupid. Like, it's such a stupid thing to be. Like, you like somebody because of the color of their skin. Like, some of the greatest people in the world are not white. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, look, Muhammad Ali, you got Michael Jordan, you got, I mean, there's some of the most amazing people in the world. Yeah. And most of the people I even listen to politically are not even white people. You know, I like Candace, I like Officer Tatum, I like
you gotta be diverse.
A whole bunch of guys that are like really, really smart.
Yeah.
And I like different perspectives, diverse perspectives. I like talking to people I disagree with, or people are more educated on a subject than I am. You know, I just love a good argument.
Of course, yeah.
You know, and that's kind of what we wanted to bring you in today. Was I wanted to kind of argue, like again. I think you kind of cleared up a lot of things for me, and I kind of like basically what I already thought as well. But at the same time, I wanted to give you a little bit of pushback on like, well, what about some of these things that are, that we're hearing. I think it is a power thing with Israel. They don't want to give that up, and they're going to continue to do the things that are in their best interest.
Yeah.
And, part of me feels like you can't really blame a country for doing that and a group of people for doing that, because it's like, if they weren't doing it, somebody else would be doing that to them.
Yeah.
I don't think if the the Palestinian people, if they took control, and this entire situation was reversed, right? Would the Palestinian people treat these Jews any different?
Absolutely. They've lived amongst us. That's what I'm telling you. So they've lived amongst us.
But I'm saying if the Jews were continuing to fight back and would they do anything different?
And I'll tell you one thing. You could take a look at the situation in Gaza and in Palestine, right? And you see these people's faith and their connection with their beliefs and their undying following of God's word, right? So a group of people like that, it'll be foolish to think that they would do something that goes against what we're taught.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Sure.
The hostages that were taken, most of the ones that were released back from Hamas back to Israel looked healthier and more well-fed and more well-maintained than when they were captured. Now you look at the opposite. You look at the hostages that Israel has of the Palestinian population and how they're released. These people are released emaciated, disfigured, traumatized, beaten, bruised, broken. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you could look at it, right? You can make that kind of jump to say, oh, well, if the tables were turned, do we think... You could look at what's currently happening and you can make a sound judgment based off of what you see.
Yeah.
Right? You could see that, okay, these guys captured hostages and they're treating them with the utmost respect. Why? Because this is something that we hold dear to our heart. This is something that was taught from the Prophet Muhammad. You know what I mean? In Islam, this is something that we hold very dear. And for people like that show and have demonstrated to the world that their faith is not going to be broken, not for Israel and not for a single other person on this earth, you could rest assured that you have nothing to worry about in terms of them doing something that deviates from our faith and just resolutions.
Sure,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you look at society, though, obviously the reality of the world that we live in, any race, any country, any group, there's always good players and there's some bad players.
Of course, yeah.
Do you feel like there's anything happening on the Palestinian side that there may be a group or whatever or major player that is like, yes, that are
Palestinian Authority, in my opinion, right? The Palestinian Authority as they currently are, right? These people they're trash, right? So in my opinion, right, coming from the Palestinian standpoint in the face of justice, the Palestinian Authority are just an extension of the Israeli force, right? That's all they are.
Is there anyone in particular, or is it just that group?
Mahmoud Abbas, him specifically, right? I don't, in the early 2000s, there was an election, and they elected, I forgot his name, his last name is Barghouti, prominent family, right? Scholars, Palestinian activists, stuff like that. But he was elected in a democratic election. The U.S. and Israel didn't like that. They arrested him, and then they placed Mahmoud Abbas as the de facto president of the Palestinian Authority. Now they placed him in there because why? They knew that he was going to be easy to control and then be in essence an extension of their arm, right? So when this whole conflict was or not the conflict, when the aggression was bubbling up, right? And then the West Bank started seeing a little bit more aggression and resistance. You had this guy who calls himself a Palestinian send out people under his direct command to go arrest and even in some situations recently kill fellow Palestinians, right? This is not bringing justice. This is bringing division, because what we need is all of us to be on the same page, and the same page is that for true justice to be achieved, right? There needs to be a proper discussion where all of the Palestinians know that, okay, in order for us to get what we need to bring them to the table, and we need to come to the table face to face with the mediators of the global powers, and we need to get something done. Because if you have factions and conflicts within the Palestinian movement, right, it's gonna continue and prolong the dilemma, if you will. Right. So you're gonna have these people that are gonna argue in support of the Israeli policies, right? Okay, yeah, you guys are not allowed to have weapons. You guys are not allowed to congregate. You guys are not allowed to have you know what I mean, mass gatherings, stuff like that.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? But if everybody's on the same page and we understand, okay, in order to move forward, we need X to happen. This is the first step that we need to take forward, and everybody is on the same page, same understanding, then discussions can begin. But as long as you have conflict from within, it'll always just kind of just circle back around.
Yeah. Now I have 3 questions left. If you have anything else, just please chime in.
No.
So I want some clarification for a personal matter that I actually experienced, and I'm not going to say any names, but I don't know if you saw the footage of when, obviously I know like right now there's like 10,000 Palestinians that are like starving and they're looking for food, right?
Yeah.
I remember seeing footage
More
of
than that, actually.
I'm sure, yeah. I saw footage of they were Palestinian that were expressing their thanks to Trump for sending food and water and stuff like that, and that they were they were upset with Hamas. Yes.
Yeah.
Can you give me some clarification on that? Do you view those people as traitors, or what is your view on that?
Well, actually, this actually has been proven for them to be traitors, right? I don't know if you guys have recently heard that Israel was actually arming a thug group within Gaza. It was called the Al-Shabaab, right? So they pretty much were
like a gang.
Yeah, they were arming these people as an opposition to Hamas. Now, this group of people, right? They were sent in to loot the aid, create chaos, come in front of the cameras and throw shade and kind of dirty up the name of the
propaganda,
resistance and stuff like that. This has already been proven. Netanyahu actually came out, right, just recently said, he admitted to it. Why? Because one of his secretaries in the cabinet came out and he was exposed. He didn't know. They found out that this guy was arming this group, right, without any authorization from the Knesset or any proper due process. And when that was discovered, he came out and said, we've been arming these people as an opposition to Hamas to create chaos.
Why do you think they're admitting to these things?
I mean, you cannot admit to it.
Yeah, sometimes you just get caught up in it.
Yeah, and it's like, it comes to the point where, like, you're red-handed.
Yeah.
It's like you can't.
Okay, so it's one of those situations.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's like time and time again. And the issue is, within the Israeli government right now, there is a lot of turmoil in and of itself, right? So you have admissions and facts coming out that are leaked accidentally. Just like, I was telling you about the base underneath the hospital.
Yeah.
They did for one purpose, to draw sympathy by showing that video.
Yeah.
Others seen that video like, hey, wait a minute.
Right.
This is underneath a hospital.
Yeah.
And this is a military base.
Right.
Weren't you guys accusing them of all? So in doing certain things, right, they're exposing themselves. And once they expose themselves, it's like the cat's out of the bag.
Right.
You can't do anything but
it.
you have to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it gets to the point where you could continuously lie to your audience, right?
But
and it's gonna get to a certain point. Yeah, but it's gonna get to a certain point where, like, people will let it slide, but then you'll get to a certain point where,
enough is enough.
Yeah, enough is enough, and people will just shut you out completely.
Right.
So in doing that, is like, okay, they admit to certain little BS things, right? The big things they won't ever really admit, but it's been proven, from international and outside organizations. But these little things, they're like, oh, look, we're being honest. We just admitted that we armed this little faction again, but we didn't blow up that hospital. We blew up next to the hospital.
Right.
You know what I mean?
They were saying that. Yeah.
It's all words.
Look at the parking lot, not the.
It's manipulation of the narrative.
Right. Okay, and then second to last question, and I pose this to both of you: what does a free Palestine actually look like in your vision, not just politically, but socially and morally?
Well, this is kind of what we touched on. You know what I mean? A one nation, one state, one person, one vote. On all of historic Palestine, man, just like they did in South Africa, we could follow similar models to what they did. They eliminated the apartheid, they eliminated the segregation, they eliminated the favoritism of one versus the other. And eventually, right now, what we have, it's still a little bit tense right now. Obviously, it's going to take generations and generations for that to kind of ease off, right? Because of the constant buildup of tension. Yeah. But that would be the first route in the right direction, because what then you would have is the Palestinians of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim faith, and then you would have the Israelis, right, which are predominantly from Europe. You know what I mean? Right now, you could see 90% of them, they're fleeing to the airport and on boat and by land to go back to their homes from which they came, right? So the first step would have to be a one person, one vote. You know what I mean? And like I said, the Palestinian people are a very welcoming people. very open-hearted. You know what I mean? We take our faith very seriously. We'll never put anybody in a situation that is unjust, and we won't, seek to destroy somebody just for the sake of, like their beliefs or their faith, But at the end of the day, it's going to have to, somebody's going to have to compromise, what we were discussing. There's going to be some compromise on both ends. Nobody's going to get exactly what they want. I mean, Palestinians are not going to get all of their land back and the Jews out. Jews are not going to get all of the land and Palestinians out. There has to be some type of compromise. You know what I mean?
If they voted in Sharia law,
that's not anywhere. You know what I mean? Like if you really talk about it, like Sharia law is, it's very few places. You know what I mean? Like in Iran, they're very secular over there, stuff like that. But all other places, you don't see it. In Syria, it doesn't exist. In Lebanon, it doesn't exist. In Iraq, it doesn't exist. In Libya, Morocco, and Tunis. You know what I mean?
True.
This whole concept of like Sharia law, like this is just another tool for
I would agree with that.
You know what I mean? Strangle the message, say, and make their enemy your enemy. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's just all tactic because Palestine, like I said, Palestine was well established long before the establishment of Israel. There was never a Sharia law in place. There was never anybody persecuted or pointed out for their beliefs or any of that type of stuff. Everybody lived in harmony.
Right.
You I know you're probably not familiar with it, but we had a few episodes ago, Tim made a point. We were talking about grace. And we were debating a scenario between myself and a family member, and he made a great point on grace cannot be like expected. It has to be given first. And if both parties are not willing to give it first, then it's never going to be accomplished. You know what I mean? Now, I did want to ask one more thing too. This is like 2B question. What is how do we get to that point, what you're talking about, from like a logistical and realistic point of view, like perspective, like what is the realistic next step? Like what needs to happen in your opinion for us to get to that point, that solution that you're talking about?
And let me just say one thing for you. I just don't see a realistic solution coming if there's a active resistance that is using either, it has to be a peaceful resistance. You know what I mean? From the Palestinian people. I would say that would be the only way, because other than that, the Jews are going to continue to look at and other those people as a threat and never want to come to a solution.
Well, that's where you have to have outside mediators, right?
Good faith mediators.
You have to.
Not manipulatable.
Leaving manipulated. It to the two, it will never get accomplished.
100%.
Right? So we do have the ability to bring in some of the world powers, and the way it was back 40, 50 years ago is much different than it is now, right? Back in the day, you had just the United States and England. Both were, prominent supporters of the establishment of Israel. Now, fortunately for us now, we have much more players in the game, right? Much more people and much more powerful nations that have the ability to voice in and make sure that their suggestions and their recommendations are going to be considered properly.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So the first step obviously is not going to be between Israel and the Palestinians themselves, but the first step is going to have to be the elimination of aggression on Israel's part. Like that is going to be the first and most dire step, is they have to cease all aggressions, right? And that's the first step. Once that is done, they come to the table and then they have to go what? They have to go answer for the crimes of which they were, accused of. That's without question. Similar to what happened in the Nuremberg trials after World War II, all of those that were affiliated and associated with what happened, right? Israel and all of those that were responsible for the onslaught and the massacre, initially, they have to go answer for what they've done. Once that is done, right, the remaining people within Israel, I'm sure will be able to understand and see the vision of the right path forward. With that, I'm sure they'll be able to kind of gather with the Palestinians along with the mediators from abroad. Start working on a plan, whether it be initially dissolving the current government as it is, whether it be adjusting it, right, to include the Palestinians, whatever the most logical and most feasible steps to take are. But the first step is, the day of reckoning has come. and somebody has to answer for these atrocities. You know what I mean? And mind you, Netanyahu and several of his cabinet members, high ranking, they're all wanted by the International Criminal Court. They all have literal arrest warrants for crimes against humanity, right? This is the equivalent of a Hitler or a Stalin, right? And the world is just, we can't afford, we're not willing to. So
I don't like that argument of they're equivalent to a Hitler or Stalin. I mean, they're not. But I understand what you're saying. Again, that's another hyperbolic type thing.
Maybe not the magnitude,
yes,
but the mentality, exactly the same, right? The intentions. It's not the result, maybe not the same, but the intentions equivocal. Okay. You know what I mean? Superior ideology, the desire to exterminate a group of people, and using force to do so.
Sure. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Do you feel though, and this is kind of a pushback question, with what has taken place, right? And I look at this from a perspective of like human psychology, right? If somebody murdered my mother and went to trial and whatever, we hash it out legally, and you asked, and say that person was in my community, my neighborhood, and then for whatever reason, they were released, whatever, or given like a pass on it, could I coexist with that person? Because what you're saying ultimately with the one state rule and the one law is like, it's going to be, obviously you're saying like, okay, we're still going to coexist. Do you feel like the Palestinian could, after everything that has transpired from their perspective, do you think they can coexist with the Jews in Israel?
I'm going to tell you one thing, and this is something that a lot of people are going to be kind of not aware of. Being Muslim, we're very tight with our faith and God's plan, right? So one thing that we have, and it's a blessing for us, is the ability to let go.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So we have that ability and that teaching that is instilled in us growing up.
Okay, is it letting go or is it an actual forgiveness?
No, it's forgiveness, right? It's because
it's a lot different than letting go.
Yeah, you can't let go without forgiveness.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it takes that process. So
forgive but don't forget kind of thing.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So it's exactly that. It's forgive but don't forget. So you have it in your mind, but you trust that this was God's plan. You eliminate all, animosity. You put your faith in God. You know what I mean? If somebody comes to it's the same concept as if an enemy in warfare comes to you and, surrenders. You're not allowed to harm this individual. Or if you capture somebody in warfare, you're not allowed to harm this person, right? It's the same kind of mentality, that stems from that. So even though the Palestinians have been put through, a century of slaughter, one could easily argue, oh, these people will never let it slide, right? They'll never let it. But you could see again and again, by them demonstrating their faith, and when their families are slaughtered and killed in front of them, they're not cursing anybody. They're not cursing the people who did it. What are they saying? They're saying, Alhamdulillah, right? They're saying, thank God, because they trust that whatever is happening,
it's according to His will.
It's according to His will. So if there was a situation to where a one-state solution were going to be granted, right? Yeah. I'm speaking from my perspective. I would feel as a Palestinian that like this is an amazing and a grand victory, right? This is a grand victory that would not have been accomplished without God's will.
Yeah.
So in doing so, right, I would look at it, okay, we need to take the proper steps to ensure that this continues. Right?
Yeah.
God granted this for us to happen. We're not going to put ourselves to make ourselves look like what they did. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because we're not the aggressors. We're the ones that welcomed them in with open arms. We're the ones that gave them the opportunity to come to a land where the land that came from was slaughtering them. You know what I mean? We've demonstrated to the world how genuine our intentions are. Unfortunately, because of the time and time again, right? They've been able to label us as hateful, vengeful, terroristic, Jew-hating individuals. And this was just, this is just the picture that's painted of us.
Yeah.
But over the course of the last 20 months, people have seen a very different light of the Palestinian people. They're looking at it, they're like, man, I don't see any like monsters from these people, coming from what we're seeing. What we're seeing is a group of people who are being slaughtered and at the same time holding their faith to a level where, like no one in the world, I've seen people watching the videos, reaction videos, faithful people, right? Like Christians and stuff like that, like go to church every day type of situation, and they see that and they feel that their faith is nothing compared to what they're seeing, right? They're saying that like all that I've been doing, it feels like I've been doing nothing compared to, because in their mind they're like, oh, maybe I complain about this, or I'm grateful about that.
Yeah.
It's little things, and they're watching people lose everything. And they're sitting
still
there,
grateful.
right? So it challenged people's own morals. Right? It challenged people's own faith. Seeing that, and unfortunately, right, what has happened in Palestine and Gaza, as screwed up as it is, it was like, in my opinion, it was something that was necessary, right?
I was gonna say preordained.
Something that was necessary to expose.
That what was necessary?
Like the slaughter,
situation.
like the October 7th and
the
the complete massacre that's been continuously going on for the past 20 months. Because otherwise, it would have just been another massacre, like they usually do every few years, right? Like last one was in 2019, before that 2014, 2009, 2002. It just every few years it happens over and over, and every time it gets more and more violent and more aggressive. Why? Because they want to see how much they could get away with, right? So the first time when it first started, like it was in the hundreds. Then you got to the 2000s, you're getting into like the high hundreds. 2014, they hit or 2009, sorry, they hit the 1,000, 1,500 mark. 2014, 2,500, right? Every time it just gets worse and worse. And when you look at right now, you're talking about like 100,000.
Yeah, lots.
You're talking about 100,000 people. And unfortunately, right now, as intense as it is, it has forced the world to not stop talking about it. So it's been continuously spoken about for almost 2 years that now it's embedded in everyone's brain. This is a topic that needs to be resolved. This is a topic that needs to, properly.
It does have that attention,
You know what I mean? So unfortunately, as screwed up as it is, these are my people, these are my family, these are my friends, these are people I hold very dear, and I will continue to fight for them as long as I have the ability. Right? This was something that God deemed necessary for the world to be exposed to what's really going on. In the words of a great Palestinian resistance fighter and author, Ghassan Kanafani, he said, if the resistance were to go quiet, right, not a single media outlet would give 1 minute of coverage to a Palestinian person. They need the violence to cover it. They need the violence. They need the viewership. You know what I mean? As soon as the things calmed down, the Palestinian cause and the issue quietly disappeared. And then it took something else, right? Another violent form of resistance. Another, another great action that was labeled as a terrorist move, right? But if you look at the context and you look at the laws, none of this is terroristic activity. These are all people that are fighting for their right, their basic human rights, which everybody in the world, is supposed to have. Yeah,
I mean, I don't at all agree that October 7th was like, it was not a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
it was not a good thing. It was still a bad thing. They did, regardless of the outcome of where it came to, and maybe that's the truth, but. I mean, October 7th, a lot of innocent people died, period.
And what I'm saying is the October 7th thing, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like what had to happen was the slaughter of my people.
No, I understand. Yes, I understand.
So I agree with you that the whole October 7th thing, right? Unfortunate, very unfortunate, right?
Yeah.
And then we have to look into it also because there are factual documents and factual statements that were made that the Israeli government themselves initiated what was called the Hannibal Directive and slaughter about 1,200 people of their own citizens. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So they have what's called the Hannibal Directive, and it was established back in the 80s and 90s.
Are you saying that?
So when the Palestinians came in, right, and they started taking hostages,
right,
and they were gathering up all these people at the festival,
right.
The Apache helicopters, they couldn't differentiate who was who.
Right.
They couldn't see who was who was an agitator, who was friendly.
Sure.
You know what I mean? They have a policy so as to avoid having to negotiate with a foreign entity.
They just kill both.
They kill everybody.
Yeah, because they don't know who's who. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So this is in their doctrine. Right? This is nothing new. There's actually already admitted people in the cabinet that said the Hannibal Directive was issued. The Hannibal Directive was issued. The helicopters just started kind of massacring. The tanks within the kibbutzes started firing indiscriminately because they can't sit there and say, "Oh, he's friendly. He's he's not." So their solution is just to kill everybody. That way, the enemy has less bargaining chips. You get what I'm saying? These are the type of people we're dealing with. Somebody who would kill their own, so as opposed to letting them being captured alive, so as to avoid having to negotiate
for that individual. Yeah,
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
These are the type of sick individuals who currently run.
Yeah, it's pretty gross.
You know what I mean? It is. It's like pretty disgusting. They have something even worse than that. It's called the Samson option. This is like something maybe for another time. But the Samson option is, if Israel's existence is threatened, they are going to initiate a nuclear holocaust. And Iran just leaked some documents not too long ago, like about a week and a half ago, that show specific targets of where they would launch these nukes if their existence was threatened. United States, England, right? Europe, LA, Chicago, New York, Seattle. Like
all the major players.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like this is not hidden. This is actually easily verifiable in all of their their doctrines and how they were established. So they got to the point where they know eventually this is not sustainable and it is going to come to an end.
Yeah.
So in order for them to protect their own self-interest or to initiate Armageddon and whatever is destroy everybody along with them.
Right.
And it's funny because like when I feel like the world looks at like, why the F do all these countries have nuclear powers? Like, don't they realize that it's going to just kill themselves?
Yeah.
And hearing something like that, it's like it would take a crazy ideal, like okay, if I'm going out, I'm taking everybody with me.
Yeah.
That's what it would take to.
I mean, I think Russia has the same policy. If America was going to whoop Russia, I think they would be like,
I think they might bomb America. I don't think they blow up like the whole world.
I agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with
Israel. Like they're everywhere.
But there's a thing called mutual destruction. If you shoot yours, I'm shooting you, and basically everyone's gone.
Mutual destruction.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much everyone's gone at that point.
But these are the type of people who they continuously tell us to go talk to.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
it's like it's pointless. Yeah.
It's like go talk to them about your worries and your concerns.
Right. I mean, amazing episode, man. I know we could probably go on forever. The one last question I do have to ask, and it's not as important as the others, but I do feel it's important. Kobe or Jordan?
Better answer this right, boy.
Please answer it right, man, because it's different between us. I'm not going to say who, but
I mean, honestly, they're both great, but because I'm in the younger generation, I think Kobe was.
And that is a wrap on episode.
Yeah, see, this is what I'm talking about. This is why I would retain power. See, this is what I'm talking about.
You didn't let me finish. You didn't let me finish because I said because I'm in the younger generation, I'm closer to Kobe.
Yes.
But the GOAT
gang.
It's Jordan, dog. It's Jordan.
I like that.
I mean,
yeah, because closer to my generation,
it is,
someone I got to enjoy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I actually got to see him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Fair enough.
But if you're really talking about it,
well played.
There's only one, bro.
Well played.
Jordan.
Well, I just want to say, man, I appreciate both.
This is good, man. I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Yeah, this was great. You did really good.
Yeah, no, amazing, honestly. And I just want to say I appreciate you both, honestly, for showing up with passion and honesty, man. Whether you guys agree with one side or the other or neither, my hope is that today we all got a chance to listen to one another and grow from that.
Excellent.
And to our audience, we want to hear from you, please. What stood out to you guys? What made you think differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and obviously, please keep it respectful. But that is a wrap on episode 8. It is.
Yes, sir.
Episode 8, man, is great.
It was a pleasure, bro.
Pleasure.
By the way, real quick, any type of tags for you, man? Like,
so we have our podcast launching soon. It's going to be called Occupy Truth. We're going to have Bashoy and Tim come. Maybe one of our first episodes, so we can go ahead and back down into it.
Yeah,
and just keep an eye out. These guys know what they're doing. They have a very good forum. Know how to address the topic smoothly. Keep things cordial and get the information out there. So I appreciate everybody for listening. Stay tuned and stay aware. Clear Views Podcast.
Appreciate you, Mo. Thank you, big dog.
No worries,
Great outro, baby.
Yeah, that was beautiful, man.